All right. So this is my 10 favorite albums of 2022. Obviously, I'm going to try to do this every year from now on at the end of the year on New Year's Eve. So I think 2022 is probably my favorite year for music of the 2020s so far. And like a lot of really great albums came out this year. And actually, my favorite album, and what I think is going to be the best album of the decade, because it's also just might be my favorite album ever, came out this year. I'm sure you guys know what it is, but I'm not going to say what it is just yet. But people that know my channel probably know what it is. Now, first we're going to go into some honorable mentions before we go into the records themselves. So, first album in my honorable mentions is Tamego by Backcover. He's a Japanese progressive rock musician. And I think it's pronounced egg in English. But it's I thought it was really good. It came out really late December, so I wasn't expecting to make more lists. I thought it was kind of going to be complete, but it surprised me, and he ended up releasing a really, really great album near the end of the year. It has elements of progressive rock, jazz rock, and stuff like experimental rock and stuff like that, and it's a really, really beautiful album that's also really experimental and atmospheric. And the next one in my honorable mentions is His Happiness Shall Come First, Even Though We Are Suffering by Backxwash. And it's, I think it was released in October and then kind of out of the blue, but I think it's her best yet. She's originally from Zambia, but then she relocated to Canada, I think Quebec. And let's see. And it kind of has the usual sound she does with industrial hip hop and also stuff like horrorcore and some elements of metal and stuff like that as well on it. It has some really good songwriting, some really great production, and some really interesting use of samples. And there's some political themes she touches on. A lot of it has to do with more with LGBT rights since she is transgender. And I really like the really interesting but different sound of the last track. And the next honorable mention is Kosoko Band by Kosoko Band. And it's another album that was released. It was actually released on Christmas. And it's actually the soundtrack to an anime that came out this year that I've never seen. Maybe I'll have to check it out because I really like this album though. It's kind of like a J-rock and has a bit of post-hardcore and stuff like that on it. It has female-led vocals too, which is fine. I think they all have. I mean, I don't know why I said that. The vocals on it are pretty good. And it has some really, really catchy melodies and some really just. I thought it was really good. It really kind of surprised me that two really great albums came out late December. Anyways, now next one honorable mention is Cheat Codes by Black Thought and Danger Mouse. And Black Thought is most well known for being in the hip hop group The Roots. And and I think this is kind of going to be in the top 10 for a lot of people. For me, it's just in my top 15 though. But I did think this is a really great album, and I think it's the best solo release Black Thought did. I think Things Fall Apart though is still my favorite thing The Roots were in, but I think it's definitely the best thing Danger Mouse has ever been a part of. It has some really, really great lyrics and some really, really great production. Some really, really interesting use of samples on this. And I think it's easily one of the best things The Roots has ever, well, one of the Roots related thing. And then my last honorable mention is The Ruby Chord by Richard Dawson, who's the progressive folk and avant folk, psychedelic folk, whatever you want to call it, musician from England. And this one came today, so I'm going to open it tomorrow. It's a really, really beautiful album. It's quite long though. The first track on this is like 40 minutes. But it's really beautiful, has some really great melodies on it, and it's definitely one of the best folk records I've heard this year. Now on to my number 10. So my number 10 is I Didn't Mean to Haunt You by Quedeka. And yes, I'm talking about the YouTuber Quedeka, the one that does rap tutorials. Somehow he made one of the best folktronica albums I've ever listened to. And it's not just folktronica, it also has stuff like glitch pop, that's stuff like neo-psychedelia, some hip-hop on here, some R&B, all this other stuff. It's very, very well produced, has some really, really beautiful sounding production, and just really, really great vocal effects. And I think I heard he did it mostly himself, though. It's really surprising to see someone like Quedeka make an album this good, but I'm excited to see more that he can do in the future. He's from California, by the way. I forgot to mention I always say where they're from. All right, next is God's Country by Chatfile, the Oklahoma noise rock and sludge metal band. from Oklahoma. This is their first album. The other two releases they did were just EPs, but they're definitely one of the most exciting groups in metal in a really long time, I think. They're definitely doing something different. On this album, they kind of touch on some political themes, like the song "Why" that covers why are there so many empty buildings out there, but we still have a homeless problem, and people can just be living inside the buildings that don't operate and have heating and everything in them, but people still have to live on the streets. But that's one of the weaker songs off the album, though, mainly because of the chorus. But I still think it's a really, really good song. There's not really a song on this I would say I really hated, but I think this is definitely their best yet, and it's one of the best sludge metal albums I've listened to in a really long time. I think it has a really, really unique type of vocal delivery and sound, and it's definitely one of my favorites of this year so far. Definitely one of my favorites of this year. The year is over. Anyways, this is Todas, flores by Natalia Lafourcade, Mexican singer-songwriter, musician. And I think she's kind of gotten better after each release, and I think this is definitely the best thing she did, and I don't really think she can really top this. This is kind of like an album that's a bit influenced by stuff like chamber folk and vocal jazz, while also her usual stuff that's very influenced by Mexican folk music and stuff like that. And she sings in Spanish on this, so I can't really understand what she's saying, but I still think the album is quite beautiful. I think she has a really good voice, and I think the music is very well produced and just really, really nice to listen to. It's really good music you just kind of have in the background and just chill out to. It's a very, very pretty album, and she did a really good job on this. Next, Hostile Architecture by Ashtonspire, which I think, this is my favorite metal album this year, I'm pretty sure. Scottish avant-garde metal band. And this album kind of touches on themes like stuff like anti-capitalism and stuff like that, stuff against racism and misogyny and all this other stuff. It has some really, really great songwriting on here and some kind of like storytelling, kind of talking lyrics, kind of like Chatfile does and Black Country New Road did on their first album. Some people kind of compared it to Black Country New Road, but I wouldn't really go that far, but because they're not the only group that does that. But there's also a bit of black metal and stuff like that and avant-garde music. Like avant-garde, like progressive rock and progressive metal and all this other stuff. But really great songwriting, some really great vocal delivery, and just really, really different, unique kind of sound with metal. I really like the use of trumpets on it and all this other stuff. And it's definitely one of the best metal releases I've heard in a long time. Next one is Diaspora Problems by Soul Glow, Pennsylvania hardcore punk band. And this album, kind of like the other one, kind of touches into a lot of themes but this one has a bit more themes that involve more far left politics, stuff like anarchism, and I'm pretty sure that I think I've seen that they have like Antifa flags and stuff like that at their concerts and stuff. So they're very, very much Marxist and leftist group, which I'm not too into really far left politics though, but I still think their music's quite good. And they also kind of touch on stuff like that. There's rap rock and screamo and noise rock and all this other stuff in there as well. And there's some parts of the album that I think, in a way, it has a bit of some humor in it on some points. And they kind of dabble into some really, really different territory. Like there's one song that just kind of breaks into a death metal kind of thing just out of nowhere. And I think there's one song that's just a complete trap metal song, even with a female vocal feature. And I think that's even one of the album's strongest tracks, but some really great vocal delivery and really addictive, tinged out like signatures and music, guitar work and all this other stuff. It's really heavy, but it's also just something that's I think is really different. I don't think I've heard anything like this in a long time. I think it's one of the best punk releases I've heard in a long time. I'd probably say I like it a lot. Next one is Aethiopes by Billy Woods, which is my favorite hip hop album of this year. And I think it's the best thing Billy Woods has done. He's originally from Washington, D.C., but he ended up growing up in New York City, I think. And it has some really, really great lyrics and songwriting and a very experimental sound. I'd say this might be the most experimental kind of out there thing he's done. There's some tracks that have full out improvisation, and I also really like how the whole album almost feels like one big track. Like the transitions on this are incredible, and just the lyrics are just very poetic, and it really kind of gives like a really kind of out there, kind of dark and kind of eerie atmosphere to this, but it's also something that's just very, very conscious and quite beautiful on a lot of tracks. I like it a lot. Next one, Big Thief, Dragon, New Warm Mountain, I Believe in You, which is a pretty long album. I think it's like almost an hour and a half long, and it has like 20 songs on it. And it's kind of ripped a bit. It's too bad. But they're from New York. They're an indie folk group. And I think this is easily the best thing they've ever done. This is the first album I actually bought by them because I liked it so much. And like I said, it's 20 songs, but it's also cohesively, generally very, very entertaining all the way through. There's not really a song on this I really would say I disliked, but I still would probably give it a 9 if I were to give it a score. But yeah, some really great songwriting, some really, really interesting, very diverse sounds. Like there's some songs on this that are very experimental, and there's some songs that are kind of sounds like country hits you'd hear on the radio, but still obviously sound good. And every song has a bit of like some sort of beauty to it. And it all has some really, really good songwriting, some very, very vivid, interesting imagery, and even touches on some conscious themes on this as well. So yeah, probably the best folk related release this year, I'd say. Next one is Ugly Season by Perfume Genius, which I'd say is the most experimental and avant-garde release in my my list, and I think this is Perfume Genius's best. He originally was born in Des Moines, Iowa, but he grew up in Seattle, Washington all his life. I almost said Washington, D.C., I'm sorry. But yeah, I think this is his best yet. I think pretty much he's gotten better after each release. With this release, I wasn't expecting him to make an album that was so experimental and so different. It kind of has a bit of a pop sound, but it's also just something that's just very, very deconstructed and just very experimental and artistic. Maybe you can kind of tell by the cover. But there are some parts of this that are also quite, I don't know if I'd say catchy, but there are some elements where you can tell that there is a lot of pop elements on this, especially on the song Pop Song. And Eye on the Wall, that's what I thought it was. Those two songs were released as singles, and Eye on the Wall was pretty experimental. Pop Song wasn't as, but a lot of people at the time were saying Eye on the Wall sounds so different than what he's doing, and then those two songs ended up being one of the more accessible on it. But there's also parts where it kind of takes some influence of classical music, with a lot of use of the piano, and I love music that has piano, and was really, really impressed with this. Maybe he'll make something even better in the future. He might surprise me, but I think this is the best thing he's done yet. And like I said, I think he's gotten better after each release. Really great album. I love it. Next one is Hellfire by Midi, which is formerly a noise rock post-punk band, became a avant-prog group. They're from England. And let me go get it. And this is definitely the best thing they've done yet by a landslide. It's very, very good. I love it. It has some really, really great songwriting, and also the vocal delivery on this is fantastic too. The drumming is amazing. There is a bit of humor in this as well, I'd say, but it's also something that's also has like some more accessible moments that also still sound great. Like there's some influence with stuff like some Latin music and vaudeville and all this other stuff. And I was really, really impressed with this, and I think this was a lot better than Cavalcade. I loved Cavalcade, but I thought this was a lot better. I just really, really love this album. I think it's their best yet, and I don't think they can really top this. I think so far they've gotten better after each release, but I don't think they can top this one. And now, I'm sure you know what my number one is. It's probably not going to be a surprise. Black Country New Road, Ants from Up There. This is definitely easily my favorite of the year. I absolutely love this album. I've talked about it so many times. I can just kind of go on and on talking about how much I love this. They're from England. They're originally a more experimental rock and post-punk band, but they've kind of gone into stuff like still post-rock, but also chamber pop and stuff like that. I think they said they're a bit influenced by Funeral by Arcade Fire, I think. But this album is so beautiful. There's just every track just feels like it has a really, really great build, a progressive build that just blows my mind. But every song sounds different. Well, I mean, they all kind of take influence from one particular track, Basketball Shoes. But they all do something different, and they all just kind of have their own cohesive sound that still works really well with the whole record as a whole. The whole record has one big theme, it kind of feels like. And I love every track on this. Even the instrumental songs I absolutely love. And the song Basketball Shoes, the closer of this, is probably my favorite song ever. I even have it as my ringtone for my phone. I have the little I don't know that part. The song, I use that as my ringtone. But I absolutely love this album. I could go on and on and on about how much I love this. I think my favorites off of this were probably Basketball Shoes and then maybe The Place Where Rain Started Delayed. They did really good on this. I really can see this album being very, very influential in the future. I can see the band in general being very influential in the future. I can't see them topping this because I think this is like almost nearly a flawless record in my opinion. I absolutely love this so much. It might be my favorite album ever. I was very, very impressed with this, and I can't imagine it not being my album of the year. Like even though it was released near the beginning of the year, I was thinking this is going to be it. This is going to be the record that ends up being my favorite, and I was right. So, anyways, that's about it, guys. Thank you for watching. Bye.